me, new scene that I'm very curious to hear much more about and already have with the two previous presentations. But I'm here to talk about Heirloom, a fairly new art center based in Copenhagen, where we're dedicated to exhibiting and initiating projects with a focus on the artistic archive. So why do we do archiving? I think we all have an illusion of the perfect archive will look something similar to this. But as we also heard before in the presentation, often it doesn't look like this, but more like this. A picture of the artist Louise Bourgeois' living room. An artist that was, through most of her life, not very recognized as an important artist, but first in her late years was brought into the spotlight of the world scene of contemporary art. In her living room, she not only worked, but also held her famous salons for other artists and intellectuals, and built her own powerhouse for her artistic work. It is today kept as an archive and an estate for her work, and still look like this. It is open to the public, and events are still being held in her spirit today. This is, of course, only possible because she gained the recognition she did, and her work are sold for a fortune. This is not the situation for many artists. However, this is an example to show why it is important to archive, but also to archive in a way that makes sense for the artist's legacy and in the right spirit of the artist's work. 2 years ago, we opened Heirloom Center for Art and Archives in order to put emphasis on the artistic archive and the artist's work as a whole. The initiative is taken by me and my partner, Stine Hebert, who also come from an art historian, as was mentioned before, and curatorial background. What we mean with the artistic archive is that we mean that we have a much more expanded notion of what belongs to an artwork today. So it can both be the question of how to document and revisit, for instance, a performance after it happened. How do we preserve it? What do we keep? And how is it possible to get access to the work when the work might not any longer be there in real? But the artistic archive is also simply working with the artist's whole oeuvre. And by doing that, we mean finding and seeing the red line through the whole practice, but also making the artist aware of how they are the key to their own practice and need to acknowledge that. So we're based in Sølvhuset, in Sølvgade, in the center of Copenhagen, but we also work internationally. So, yeah, we are an art center. We are concerned with exploring artistic legacy and overlooked collections in dialogue with contemporary art. In the program, we pay special attention to ephemeral practices and discussions around gender, identity, and transnational exchanges. It is our ambition to revisit and contextualize art practices through new curatorial concepts and formats. Working with this kind of material takes a long time and needs a long-term commitment. We realize that many of the archives and exhibitions we work with needs much more contemplation and dwelling, in short, research, in order to find the right way to reactivate them. We named the art center Heirloom, and heirloom in Danish arvestykke is an object that travels through time and generations. Imbued with ever-changing meaning, and its value is never persisting. This ongoing negotiation of meaning and value reflects our approach to working with archives, art practices, and collections. And we also wanted to react upon the social justice movement that are made clear recently through both instance, Black Lives Matter and Me Too movements, and acknowledged that we need to broaden the diversity of the stories collected and encourage a more critical engagement with the material embedded in cultural heritage. We hope to shed light on previous unseen connections, and we will be able to offer new perspectives on and context for the stories told. We have 3 program strands in our art center, and curating is the most maybe visible one, and I will briefly take you through some images of a few of the exhibitions that we have done over the last 2 years. We have annual produced 4 exhibitions and an event program connecting to the exhibitions that we do. Textile Memories was our first exhibition, a group exhibition reflecting not only on textual materials as artworks, but also many of the histories that are carried out with textual material and which contemporary artists have worked with today. Here's a performance we did with Jupiter Child. Berlin, Remembering the Spectacle by Rose English and Sally Potter, an exhibition where we revisited a series of performances under the title Berlin, carried out in London in 1980 by performance artist Rose English and film instructor Sally Potter. And here a meeting between the two who hadn't seen each other for 40 years. And as soon as they stepped into the situation, they just went into performing. It was quite an amazing experience. And this group exhibition, Mother Always Has a Mother, presented work of a collection of Danish and international artists, all of whom engage with the topic of intergenerational relationships. The different works addressed family ties and questions of how to understand oneself through one's origins. So we also do research on various levels. For instance, some exhibitions are carried out in close collaborations with research institutions and projects. So the exhibition, this one, Heart on the Tongue, we did this fall with Mia Edelgaard and Eva Lacour, was produced in collaboration with Art as Forum and PARS Center for Art, for Practice-Based Art Research at the University of Copenhagen. Edelgaard and Lacour's exhibition centered around Jeff Cornelis, whose films and TV programs produced for national Belgian television challenged ideas of what the medium can and ought to be in both form and content. A method the two artists both related to in their own method of working with video art. The collaboration included research seminars both before and when the exhibition took place at Heirloom. And we also do education and advocacy. We offer annual a course in collaboration with the Visual Artists Association, in Danish BKF, with a course where our aim is to offer a number of perspectives on how visual artists can engage with their own artistic archive. The goal of the program is to deepen artists' understanding of their collective body of work, addressing key issues stretching from copyright and legal considerations to conservation practices and creative approaches. We have named the course I'm an Archive, inspired by the British artist Barbara Stevini, who in her late years revisited some of the pivotal points in her political and social engaged art practice. The title serves both as a tribute to the artist's legacy and a poignant, somewhat cynical reminder that the artist often constitute the most comprehensive archives of their own work, possessing invaluable knowledge not held by any other institutions. At the moment, we only offer this kind of course to the artists, but we hope to, in a near future, also to offer the course for institutions, museums, and archives, and in order to work with, to get better to include artworks that fall in between the categories, but also simply the archive of the artist, and not only having specific works in the collection. For this occasion, I would like to go into our first project for working for an archive to become secured and permanent by a grant from New Carlsberg Foundation. It is the archive Let Us Speak Now by artist Kirsten Dufour. Even though we believe in long-term commitments, we are not a secured institution yet. We are non-profit and run by mostly various private funds, and therefore we cannot host any collections or archives. But Let Us Speak Now is a video archive consisting of 80 interviews focusing on feminism, activism, and art production, based on interviews with Danish and international feminist artists and activists. And let me shortly introduce you to Kirsten Dufour, for those of you who might not know of her work. Kirsten Dufour studied at the Royal Danish Academy from 1965 to 70. During her time as a student, she co-founded Kanonklubben, the Canon Club, a school at the academy without a professor, and specialized in video work. She became active in the associated group of feminist artists responsible for creating some of the first major feminist manifestos of the 1970s. For example, the exhibition Damebilleder, Lady Pictures, at Kunsthal Charlottenborg in 1970. Kirsten Dufour has since engaged in an art practice that deals with collectivity, activism, and feminism, one that seems completely unique in a Danish context. She has explored the limits of art and its potential for change in collaborations such as Tøj til Afrika, Clothes for Africa, collecting clothes to send to different countries in Africa. It was in the 70s and 80s. YNKB, Ydre Nørrebro Kulturbyrå, which is took place just around further up the road, an artist group with the concern of the living in this local area, and also Astrid Nord's Atelier, which is also in this area, that has run since 2009 and still running, and it's taking its starting point from the Danish artist Astrid Nord's social work from and around her studio here. Let Us Speak Now embarked as Kirsten Dufour got a residency in Los Angeles in 2002 for 3 months. She started, the starting point for the archive was a desire to investigate the feminist strategies developed through the years in the overlap between art and activism, and to discuss how these strategies have been translated into contemporary discourses and projects. And what Kirsten really wanted to explore was, she knew the Danish art scene, but she didn't know how it happened abroad. So the archive contains interviews and conversations with important actors of the early feminist movement from the 1970s, as well as younger generations of artists and activists with a feminist approach. It consists of interviews with both well-known and lesser-known feminist actors, such as Faith Wilding, Carol Sheeman, Julie Auld, Mary Beth Edelton, the Guerrilla Girls, and Martha Rosler. And at the present, the archive contains interviews from the US, Costa Rica, France, Armenia, Great Britain, Austria, Mexico, Lebanon, Turkey, Denmark, and Sweden. Kirsten Dufour has been the main person working with the archive, but the interviews has always been done together with colleagues who has over the years been engaged in the archive. the archive contains all accounts of the many struggles the feminist movements has faced over a period of 40 years. With archive, Kirsten Dufour is not only interested in delineating a number of feminist discourses and their point of view, but also integrating these positions and experience into a contemporary discussion about feminism and bringing them together in a network of voices and narratives. The combined archive presents an entire era of feminist history and should be seen in its entirety through all its particular differences and cross-references. The various interviews has also been collected through a non-linear method in a fractal pattern structure of who suggests who. So she would make an interview and then she would ask the person she interviewed, who should I go to next? That would be her method. And of course it took places on the many travels that Dufour did. This was a piece of paper that she brought along with some questions, and it wasn't strictly going through all those questions, but it was questions that she would bring up, and if they got lost in an interview, then she sort of say, so could we talk about this, maybe, or what would you like to talk about? So a very liberate way. I'm getting there. When Dufour began the archive in 2002, it was to point out the importance of revitalizing the feminist art movement of the 1970s and place it in a present context. The artists from the era were in the process of being discovered and inscribed as part of the history of the movements from the 1960s and 70s. The central aspect of Dufour's project was to give artists and activists themselves a platform through which they could speak for themselves, but also show the narrative to be broader by connecting the heard voices with the unheard ones. These constituted an important underground or foundation for the movement, its development, and the experiment that came out of this collective practice. So together with and this is the last slide. Together with artist Pia Rönnecke, we have for several years now tried to get a larger art institution, both museums, art centers and academies, interested in hosting and becoming the home of the archive without any luck. One university archive in the UK was interested in hosting it, but Kirsten Dufour didn't want it to move outside of Denmark. Then last autumn, to our great fortune, the New Carlsberg Foundation's digital archive, called Primary Sources in Danish Art History, Kilder til Dansk Kunsthistorie, one of the only digital archive and artist contextual work in a Danish context, made an open call for new archives to be obtained. It already at that time contained 16 sources, mainly letter archives, and is now taking in 9 new archives. And this one is the first to be submitted by a living artist, and it is the first archive consisting of video archiving to be included. So not long ago, the archive was a lot of hard disk and cassette tapes in a shoebox, and it's now looking like this and being reachable for a new public. With this example, I wanted to show that we find that the time is changing and various institutions are opening up for what seems impossible not long ago. And with the work in Heirloom, we hope we are creating the hub for the art world that we find is needed in order to discuss questions around the work of care of art practices and artistic archive. Thank you. Thank you.